Court have adjourned the case between the federal government and ASU to September the 16th, which is Friday, and also aviation workers have shut down the airport over new laws. You're welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International, a current and news affair program where we tend to look at various stories that are trending on our Nigerian newspaper. I am Sada Elisha, and I have with me Rachel. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Sarah.
How is the weather? It seems to be a rainy Tuesday.
It's very cold.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly run through the papers, and you do us, the honor starting with the Daily Trust newspaper.
Yes, we're starting with the Daily Trust, and at the top of the paper, there's Daily Trust invites nominations for African of the Year 2022 award. Then we have parents cautious as schools resumes in states. 2 swept away, 9 rescued as flooding hits Niger, Ekiti, and Lagos. And the big story, aviation workers shut airports over new laws. Insists banning union activities illegal, issue 14-day strike notice, passengers stranded, minister denies struggling in new clauses. FG versus ASU. Court adjourns hearing to September 16. Concern over non-assent to Nigerian startup bill. I attempted killing my dad 3 times to inherit his money. And then at the bottom of the paper, Obi to Tinubu, presidency not turn by turn. We'll activate our structures in 774 local government for Obi. The NLC president said that we've golden opportunity to address challenges. And then the Labour Party chairman says that I believe this can be said to Tinubu also. It's not a turn-by-turn thing. It's not a, I must become a president. You're not fit for it. But with the way you sound in your campaign, it's like, I must do this. It's my turn. So if Obi is saying this to Tinubu, then he's not wrong because that's it.
Of course,
yes.
Richard, when you look at some of the statements coming from, all these presidential candidates,
Yes.
I know even just like you rightly stated, it's just a way of their manifestos, and it's another way of actually saying what the chances they stand.
Sure.
I remember from the very beginning when people were against Tinubu, and he was like, the present president have actually served. It's his turn.
It's his
So
turn.
serve. It now look as if Nigeria has now become an inheritance.
Yes.
Or the presidential seat have become an
Exactly.
inheritance. That when your father passed away as a
You
child, it
take
is your
over.
right to take over. But I think we have to come to that point, or we also have to come to that realization, just like you said, that it's not about the tone. Nigerians have actually stated some of the reasons or some of the things they look out for from particular, candidates. There was a rumor that, was spreading around where they said Tinubu is planning to step down because of his health challenges. And, they came out to say that all those are rumors of people that are against the APC candidate,
Yes.
and also, looking at what he stands to give, because lots of people that, rallying around Tinubu. But regardless of who your presidential candidate is, I think it's high time you come out and, in your numbers, and make sure that whoever the person you will elect into office should be the person that have the competence, the character. We need to also look at some of their track record.
True.
It's one thing for you to rule the state, but it's another thing for you
the
to
whole
rule the
country.
whole country. Just like we saw here, saying that we'll activate our structures in 774 local governments for OB, coming from the National Labour, Congress presidency. Now, this is what they want, possibly to go with the Labour Party. But Nigerians actually know who they want at the end of the day.
Exactly.
And another story that actually caught my attention is these aviation workers, shut airports over new law. This is not the first time we're hearing issues of certain air flights being shut down as a result of either we had the issue of the diesel that is very high.
Yeah.
We also have the way we also have where, if you look at just for you to fly to certain places. We saw it on the paper yesterday. From 2 million people are now paying 5 million.
Exactly.
You can imagine just from just to Abuja how much you pay. It's not double the price we were paying initially.
Yes.
So there are lots of laws that are being introduced, even though the minister is being being accused and he's denying smuggling some new clauses. We also need to look at some of these laws and clauses. Are they going to be favorable to passengers? We're seeing that passengers are also stranded.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine going to the airport and then at the end of the day there is no worker to attend to you, no air flight to take off, and issues back and forth. So I think we need to come to that realization. It's not just about the present administration, but if we take a look at some of the certain sectors, we'll realize that for a very long time, even from the past administration, lots of attention have not been given to this. Because if you should, come into office, regardless of the party that you take over from, it's expected that whatever the baggage is and also the interest is, you are going to inherit it. So it's expected that you address it. No wonder we are seeing that the issue between the federal government and ASU have been adjourned to September 16, which is on Friday. But we can see there are some of the issues where the minister, first and foremost, the Minister of Education told, the students that they should sue ASU because lecturers have refused to pay them after paying their school fee. They should pay them back. You could imagine. And we're seeing that possibly the federal government now took that as an initiative to sue ASU to court that they have refused to go back. But we need to look at both sides.
Both sides, yeah.
Even though I know that ASU, to some point, people are actually looking at they have their own share to pay. But federal government also have. If enough attention have been paid to the educational sector, I believe we'll not be where we are.
We won't be having the same programs and the same problems year in, year out. It's like a back and forth. What is that problem that hasn't been solved all these years? So like when you look at it, it's a two-way street. We can't blame it on one person. We can't say ASU is wrong for staying that long, and we can't say, okay, the federal government has the right to sue ASU. No, everybody has their part to play, and if everybody should play their part, we won't be where we are right now.
Of course, we'll move further. So we hope that with all this, the aviation sector, the educational sector, and even the power sector, at the point in time, even on our paper, we can see the workers threatened strike.
And the problem for me with the aviation sector is, it's like the roads are not safe. People are now opting for like longer journey, and then you go and you're stranded. So it's like, because last week there was this complaint about the price going high. So it's no longer about the price, because it's my life now. People are ready to, okay, no matter how expensive the flights are, we will take it, because I'm not sure I'll reach Lagos safe, I'll reach Port Harcourt safe, because the roads are not safe. Am I going to struggle with kidnappers? And now when we decide to follow the sacrifice and say, okay, no problem, I'll spend that much, the flight is not there. So what do they want us to do in this country?
I think, Rachel, they have really, really heard this question, and they would actually have to give us the answer. What do they want us to do? We cannot use the road, we cannot use the train, we can't even use the air right now. So lots of things. Well, let's move further to the Vanguard newspaper. We have a big interview where we say how we are using the NILDS to deepen legislative experience. This is coming from the DJ Prof. Suleiman. You can read up the big interview on page 14. And we saw the attack on Uber that was since yesterday. Ifeanyi in Anambra, we see 2 policemen and 3 civilians were killed. 2 are being hospitalized, and this is a report coming from the police to verify issues that happened. We hope those that are behind this attack will be brought to book soon. And on ASU strike, court defers hearing on federal government suit till Friday. Detail found on page 9. Civilian JTF kills 9 terrorists and arrests 5 in Katsina State. Moving further, we can see the aviation crisis. Domestic flight movement crashes by 215% in the first quarter of 2022. The big story here, still on 2023, we have Akeredolu, Gumi differ on same fate tickets, with the rider saying Muslim ticket deceitful. We need experienced leader. This is coming from Gumi. And North can produce the next president again. This is coming from Ondo governor. Says the struggle for the southern presidency shouldn't be in vain. Begs Christians over APC Muslim ticket. And Peter Obi planning fake assassination attempt. This is an APC, alleges. Well, you can read up that story on page 5. And on 2023 poll still, chance to turn around nation's fortune. This is coming from Cannes. And on aviation bills, passengers stranded as workers protest anti-labor clauses. Detail found on page 9. We have another story here, which is from the presidency. Tinubu, not ill, won't withdraw from the race. This is coming from the campaign council. I believe this is in relation to the rumor that said he's stepping down because of his ill health. PDP crisis. Wike keeps party leaders guessing. Well, the issue of PDP keeps getting, interesting by the day. You can read up that story on page 8. No fund for 2023 election petition tribunal. Appeal court president laments. Detail found on page 9. And we see Save My Life. This is coming from Ekweremadu's daughter appeal for kidney donation. And detail also can be found on page 8. We have a picture story here. Labour Party launches Porter. So you can read up that story inside the Vanguard newspaper. That's all on the Vanguard.
All right, we go to this day. And at the top of the page, federal government eyes $4 billion annually from cashew export. Country currently has 15 active processing plants with estimated capacity of 55,750 metric tons. I hope this is true, because this feels like good news.
Of course,
if we can leave crude oil for once and start tapping into other resources we have, that we can industrialize them and commercialize them and make them bigger, in the sense that if we have enough of cashew to export, I feel we should go to the next step of processing them, because we know that that's where the big money is. Now, this is hope, but we're in Nigeria, and it's like anytime our hopes it's always
have a leap of hope, and
yes,
then all of a sudden
tomorrow you start hearing stories about this cashew, or probably somebody will use it and shine, get all the money they need to get, and it's no longer in the picture.
Rachel, this is just, I think if you ask me in relation to this and, cashew export, this is just one out of the many other resources we have when you check the agri sector.
True.
I mean, remember back then when we had the cocoa that we do export. I remember we have the rubber. I remember we have other natural resources that are yet on top. And these are millions and billions being buried on the ground. And we are yet to realize that, just like you said, we are concentrating so much on the oil. And we're already having issues with the oil that we're having oil vandalism, oil theft left, right, and center. We are yet to get the exact figure of how much of crude oil we produce on a daily basis, and even on a monthly basis, not even talk of a yearly basis.
Even the oil we are bragging about, we don't have the monopoly over it. But you see, things that we grow, we can have the monopoly over it, in the sense that OPEC will come and tell you, okay, you are selling your barrel this amount this year, and that's what you have to sell it. So we're not completely in charge and in control of it.
I think, Rachel, this is still because of, if you ask me, sorry to take that word out of your mouth, if you ask me, I think it still boils down to we. Because when I said we as a whole, I think it's high time we stop blaming the government, the administration, but then we need to come together. Take a look at the Niger Delta. That is where we depend mostly on the oil. So much I've done about that. Back was then where amnesty had to be paid for them to actually leave the people that are working there, the oil workers, to be able to actually to process it. But if you take a look at it, it's just like we are using our own hands to destroy ourselves. What happened to us reviving our own refineries? I mean, just like you said, OPEC will actually dictate to us how much we sell. But then presently, OPEC are even saying we have not even made up to the quota we're supposed to contribute. And if we talk about oil, Nigeria is among, if you're going to mention the first 5, Nigeria is part of it, but you still have to ask question, why are we still poor? And that is why this cashew export is coming into it. I think we have to, for a period of time, take our eyes away from the oil, because for each time Nigeria got into recession, agriculture was always there to bail us out of it. So why don't we check into that sector and see if agriculture is why we get out of recession? Then so much needs to be done. How much is being allocated to the agri sector? Just last year or the early this year, we had the rice pyramid that was being launched by the president, but then still we're complaining about wheat that because of the Russia Ukraine. I mean, this is not what we're supposed to be
Exactly,
concentrating on.
shouldn't be a
You don't have to
problem.
eat wheat. I mean, we have our cassava. We can use it to make bread and so many other
So
things.
many.
So I hope we're also looking to, expand our tentacles and see what we can get out of it.
Nigeria had special place in Queen Elizabeth hat, says Lang. You can see more of that on page 10. Buhari, despite our challenges, other nations still believe in Nigeria's potential, and that's the truth. They can see greater potentials in us than we can. And the big story, The Economist, Nigeria missing out on rare global oil boom opportunity, says woeful economy contributing to violence, describes 4 billion Tombola contract as bizarre, prosecutes suspected oil thieves, Senate orders military security chiefs. Falama, I have evidence. Government knows those behind crude oil theft smuggling. Obi estimates 1.3 trillion naira worth of crude oil stolen. We mentioned something about this concerning the oil theft. It's too big for just a local to do that. That's one of the things. There's so much speculation about it that this kind of theft, number one, is a very intelligent theft. It's too massive for you to say
Just a few
just
individuals,
a few
of course, or
individuals are
low-class
involved.
people,
Yeah.
just like Peter Obi is saying, or Falana Sorry is
Yes.
actually saying, and even Peter Obi is even adding up to say 1.3 trillion
The-
worth of
yeah,
crude oil being stolen.
stolen.
I mean, that is how much we've lost. We've lost about $700 million. We're going to convert that to our Nigerian naira. You know how
yeah,
much we'll get
a
to
lot.
realize at the end of the day. And just like Falana is saying, I am totally behind him personally, because this is my opinion, because I feel that for this oil to move out of the shores of Nigeria, I mean,
Exactly.
just like you said, looking at the quantity, I mean, it's not just few individuals.
not
We
few
need to have
individuals.
high-class people. We saw it yesterday where they were saying that Mahmoud that was arrested, he said that there was a will I say an ex Northern West governor that is involved. He mentioned another national security agency that is involved in. Now you see, if we have all these people, even though we cannot just totally come out and say, okay, yes, it is. Interrogation needs to be done for us to know. But then I feel that, just I have said this and I'll keep adding up, maybe it's high time we start having public persecution of all these people. This will serve as a lesson to other people that are actually, behind the doors, that are doing other things we're not aware of. Let's not just keep the stories on the paper, because, okay, after today, what else?
What else?
Will Nigerians know who the people are? At the end of the day, we hear that secret persecution is being carried out just the way it's being done to those who are sponsoring Boko Haram. I mean, if you are a robber back then, and then we have the national
their
television,
faces was
and then
all
we
over
see
it.
the open fire squad being,
Yes.
carried out on you publicly, Nigerians will know, okay, you need to be aware of somebody else. So why can't we have the same thing being done? No
Same
wonder
should be
people are
done.
saying maybe we should bring back dead by hanging, dead by, firing squad. Maybe this will now
Maybe.
put fear in people, for them to know that nobody is above the law, that, the rule of law needs to take its place at the end of the day on all these people.
Airstrike hits terrorist hospitals in Sambisa Forest. You can see more of that story on page 25. And that's all the news on this day.
All right, let's move further to Daily Sun newspaper. Outrage anger train deadly attack on Senator Uban. You can check that on page 27. Big story, Tinubu Obi clash as Atiku faces editors. We need competent, not it's my turn to rule. This is coming from the Labour Party candidate telling the APC standard bearer. Obi continuing lies against the ex-Lagos governor. This is coming from the campaign councillor. Editors interrogate Atiku on policy plans. You can read up that on page 6. Akere Dodo begs Christians over the Muslim ticket. Detail found on page 6. Kudos knocks over federal government suit against ASU. Court adjourned case to September 16. Lekki Deep Seaport kicks off operation September 16. Mali, Chad, Niger to transit cargoes via port. You can read up that on page 2 also. And on 2023, votes will count, INEC assure Nigerians. And I think we also need to add our voice
True.
for Nigerians who feel that, what is the point getting my PVC? What is the point going to the polling unit on that day? We had issues yesterday where they say possibility is that we will have a cyber crime because we said we're going digital
Yeah.
this time around. And even though it's not really totally digital because people outside the shores of Nigeria cannot vote at the end of the day, but then we hope that we'll get to that point, we'll advance to the point that regardless of where you are, I mean, it's not about having whether you have an Android phone or whatever it is, from the comfort of your house, you can actually vote for whoever it is. But here INEC is saying votes will count, and we're adding our voice to say that the votes will count. I mean, if your vote will not count, why do they canvass for it? Why do they pay you for
Exactly. Why
that?
do they? So you should know it counts.
That it
Like
counts, of
personally,
course.
I love this assurance from the INEC, and I've been excited about the digital vote. I've always asked, when are we going to have this in Nigeria? It's finally here, and I'm looking forward to it. You don't have to worry about cyber crime. Like, that's the least. First, what are the advantages we have? Then before you can start thinking about, you have to be positive first. Let the negative part of it not overshadow you and be like cybercrime. There will be cybercrime, but we still stand to gain from this. So let's be pessimistic and
course.
very, instead of being pessimistic, let's be optimistic that this is going to play out well for us, and I know it will play out well
Of course,
for us.
it will play out. Other stories still on Daily Sun. 2023 election opportunity to turn Nigerians' fortune for good. This is coming from Khan. King Charles II continued to maintain affection for Nigerian and British High Commissioner is saying this. We have angry Senate moves against oil thieves, urges security forces to go after them. I mean, I hope the time limit will be given so that those behind it will be brought to book. The last story, Wike turned Amechi challenges him to enter presidential vida. Detail can be found on page 26. We have a picture story here where we can see crowds struggling for space in the Market Shift Bridge due to the collapse of the Obere Teyo Bridge in Ora local government of Oyo State yesterday. Imagine in such a place like Oyo, it's as if we do not have government taking care of that. Who is
And
the
this looks
commissioner of
dangerous
works?
because
Imagine, just look at how slim that bridge is, and
yeah,
anything can happen. You can actually push someone into the water.
yes.
You can see the crowd. Some are also already waiting at the other end.
And
You know,
probably because the bridge is not built for this much crowd at the
yes,
same time,
yeah.
it can
So
collapse.
anything can happen
Anything
at the
can
point in
happen.
time.
Yes.
So I think we have to call on the Oyo, government to look into this. If you are, and this is where you see somebody will be, vying for a position, and you say, I will do this, I will do that. Just mouth of one. Then look at the roads people are
Honestly,
passing. You are not even
honestly.
concerned about their safety. I mean, this is really annoying looking
Very
at such a thing
annoying.
like this. And this is just an example, one out of the many other
Many,
states
yeah.
in Nigeria. This is just in Oyo, a local government there. So what if we take a statistics of other local
Other.
governments in Oyo, then we move further to other states, not just in the south, but also come down to the north. You know that they are even more, very pity. I mean, this is really, really, really not something that should be on our papers. I hope that something will be done to address the issue of the road over there. And that's all on the Daily Sun newspaper.
Right. On Nigerian Tribune, INEC should operate free from outside pressure. EU tells federal government, advises politicians against violence and hate speech. You can see that on page 22. Aviation workers protest in Lagos, shut down operation at Kano Airport. FAN disconnects. NAMA facilitates over 500 million naira debt. More of that story on page 6. And the big story, flood hits Ekiti, Niger, and Lagos. 9 rescued as building 6, 2 adults missing. School fence collapses, kills 2 children in Lagos. Passengers stranded as Minabida Road caves in. You can see more of that on page 26. And there's also a picture story where you can see people trying to find their way through the flood. Federal government versus ASU, court adjourns proceeding till Friday. Government's action commendable, Falana. You can see that on page 28. 2 policemen, 2 aides, 1 other killed in Uber's convoy attack. That's the police. You can see that on page 5. Ekweremadu's ailing daughter publicly appeals for kidney donor. You can see that on page 25. And I pray and I hope that she gets someone to help her. Everybody deserves a chance to live. I know this is something big, asking for someone to give you a kidney. But then God is a miracle worker.
Of course,
And I
something
believe
can
that
happen.
this is nothing big for him. He can actually send help her way. Pay 10 million naira to family of slain Kogi PDP women leader. ECOWAS called others federal government. Alafin stool. Atiba descendants kick once selection process discontinued. You can see more of that story on page 5. No king has right to claim paramountcy over others in Ondo. You can see more of that story on page 29. And that's all the story on the Nigeria Tribune.
All right, let's move to New Telegraph newspaper. A report from CBN says federal government earning from oil gas hit $25.37 billion in 5 months. Other story, we have how AITA $30 billion support for African aviation and tourism failed to reach people in need. You can read up that on page 8. On the strike hearing in federal government sued against the ASU stalled. You can read up that on page 3. And Nigeria ranks second on child malnutrition globally. This is coming from the federal government, saying about 2 million children at risk nationwide, coming from UNICEF. It's really sad each time we see Nigeria being the first or the second when it comes to very sad issues. We saw on Friday where we are the highest when it comes to monkeypox. Yesterday we saw about 21 more cases just in 7 days, that's 1 week. And then we're beginning to see that when you talk about out-of-school children, we are possibly about among the first 3 to have about 20.2 million out-of-school children. Now we're seeing Nigeria ranks second on child malnutrition globally. Take a look at insecurity, definitely will contribute to that. You need to take a look at some of the kids living in the northwest, northeast. You will really know what malnutrition looks like.
True.
And we're busy supporting other nations, forgetting that we have our own internal issue. Insecurity has made people cannot even go to their farms. Now, you need to, because the way it's looking right now, I'm even running out of words, because from next year, possibilities are how much were we able to recover. We saw the World Bank and other people contributing to food crisis in other nations. In fact, it has gotten to a point that Nigeria was not part of those that were being given this fund to support us in food crisis. Why? Because we have what it takes to be able to do all that. We saw the cashew export that we're planning to do to increase our own GDP. So I think if we want to really eradicate this malnutrition, not just in kids, but it's also in adults, because it's, if you take a statistic of how many homes can even afford 2 square meals,
True.
there are some, even one, they can't afford. So a lot of things are actually responsible for these 2
This is
million
very
children
sad,
at risk nationwide.
because
It's
you
sad.
should think that something like this should be far from us, and then you see that we keep struggling, and then the question still boils down to, what are we going to do about it? What is the government doing about it? Because it's 2022. This is not 20 years after independence, or this is 2022. And just as you said, we have the capability, we have the capacity to solve all of these things, but then we are still struggling. It's very sad, and it makes you wonder, where is the problem, and then what is the solution to this?
Well, let's look at other stories still on the New Telegraph newspaper. Reps summon TCN boss over 207 billion naira. Office maintenance expenditure detail found on page 2. We have assassination attempt. Death toll rises to 10. The big story, after 8 years, North can't retain power. This is coming from the southern governors. Akere Dodo have urged Christians to look beyond the APC same-faith candidacy. Next year's polls can turn around nation's fortune. This is coming from Khan. Nigerians should do away with ethno-religious politics, says Gumi. And on the continuous voter registration, we have dictated several multiple illegible registrars. This is coming from INEC, not to look at the over 7 million that were being denied the opportunity to continue the registration for their voters card. And we're seeing that we have several multiple illegible registrars. That means there are lots of people that their registration was not, so it's really a sad one. Well, for those that, how you can know is Google, you have your name, your birth. This is the way you can check if you've actually registered
they have
properly.
A portal for
they have
that,
a portal for
so
that, so you can actually check that,
sure.
so you know whether you're eligible or not, because our vote will really have to count come 2023. We have the Nigerian Air Force bombs terrorist medical facility in Sambisa forest and kills scores. Downside of it, we have Tin Can Island on ports, lack of expertise stalled 100% cargo inspection as acquired scanners gather dust 1 year after. We have trained personnel to use them, says custom. Importers lost 100 billion naira overtime cargo penalty as manual inspection slows process, lament inability to service loan. This can be found on page 3 and 7. We have a study here. You can do well to read that study on page 26 of the New Telegraph newspaper. But before we move further to other papers, Rachel, I would like us to take a time out right at this moment so we can actually open the phone lines for our callers so that they can call us and let us hear what your contributions are. And remember, we're live on Facebook and YouTube. You can drop your comments on any of the story that's of interest to you. Please do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies on Echo Television International. We've been looking at various stories trending on our papers, from the adjournment of the case to Friday, between the two-party federal government and ASU. Aviation workers actually shut down airport because of some new laws that have been introduced, and Nigeria having about 2 million, victims in Nigeria for malnutrition. This really is sad one. So we really like you to call us. Let us hear what your feels are concerning all of the stories. And also you can drop your comment on Facebook and we'll read it real time. And I'm still with Rachel, and Rachel, thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you.
Let's move further to the new Crook report.
Yes, okay. So what commercializing NNPC means for Nigeria's oil and gas industry, you can read more of that story on page 13. And I'll encourage you to read it because Nigerians really need to know what it means, like what are the benefits. I know when it came to the communication company, when it was sold, we were told it's a good thing for us. But now to make calls are very expensive. You wonder, maybe we should have stayed with Nitel, where you just pay for your lines and then make your call, because MTN is not cheap, Airtel is not cheap, making phone calls are no longer cheap. So I just hope that it's not just one of those things that they will tell us all the good side about it, and then years down the road we are regretting and wishing we never sold it or we maintained it as a federal government sector. And the big story, no more marginal fields discretional blocks award, says government. PIA outlaws practice, 17 marginal fields producing, oil theft increasing challenge, NUPRC. Nigeria Customs suspend GT Bank from import duty collection. NCDNB and LNG to deepen partnership on projects. LPG penetration. You can see more of that story on page 17. Nigeria losing $1.9 billion monthly to oil theft, NNPC. We can see more of that on page 6. Lekki Port project to provide 112,000 jobs for Nigeria. So we can see more of that story on page 42. And that's all the news on Sweet Crew today.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily Times newspaper. Still on the strike, I think it is almost on all our papers to show the seriousness of this issue. Court adjourned suit between federal government and ASU to September 16th. We have on 2023, INEC invite observers from international community. You can read up that on page 3. And how NNPCL loses $700 million monthly to oil theft. And on same faith ticket, I'm also worried as a Christian, says Akere Dodo, detailed on page 3. Still on 2023, I won't prefer excuses as president. This is coming from Peter Obi. He says the responsibility of a leader is to solve problems, not give excuses. And berate the federal government for failing to resolve the penury industrial action by ASU. Well, one thing is for you to say, another thing is for us to say being actionized. But we keep our fingers crossed to see what he has for Nigeria come 2023. And on insecurity, Senate leadership meets military intelligence chief wants oil theft suspect persecuted. An aviation union gives the federal government 14 days to export smuggle clauses from the bill. Downside, we have Sorudu, Obi, Oribo, and others condemn attack on Ifeanyi. You can read up that on page 5. And that's all on the Daily Times newspaper.
On the Nations, pardon, I bear no grudge against anybody, says Inyame. You can see that on page 29. INEC cancelled 1 million voters registration. Ineligible entries voided. You can see that on page 4. JAMB insists on no biometric, no examination policy. Scores killed as NAF jet hits terrorist hospital. And the big story, you see PDP in distress, says Otom. Benue governor blames Atiku Wike rift on leaders. And there's a quote, there are certain internal mechanisms that should apply to conflict resolution within the party, and that's very true. 2023, EU cautioned politicians against hate speech and violence, and we were witnesses to 2015. There was a lot of hate speech and nothing was done about it, and the same government that won with hate speech came and became very strict with hate speech, that even when you're saying the truth, it will be tagged at hate speech and then you will be dealt with. It was quite unfortunate. APC campaign council accuses Obi of playing ethnic card. Article 2, uphold 5-point development agenda. Man stabs brother to death. That's a very sad story. And that's all the news on the nation.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Federal government began tax recovery from 2,000 mining firms. With that found on page 19. Akere Dodo apologizes to cleric over Muslim ticket. Passport insurance raised by 38%. More Nigerians relocate. You can read up that on page 20 of the Punch. We have other stories here. We have Ekwere Madu detained, 82 days, daughter 6 kidney donor. The big story say boundary dispute worsen insecurity. 676 killed in states. The writer following that story say 444 houses runs in communal clashes in Ebonyi, Kogi, Cross River, and others. Federal government addresses 86 cases. Security expert, lawyers blame governors. And Khan decries the rising insecurity. Senate promises 2023 jumbo security allocation. It's one thing for it to have the allocations, and another thing for it to be used in the right way to actually secure lives and properties. Picture story which we saw most of our papers, and this is from the Lagos flooding. Rescuers recover 2 corpses and save 9. You can read that on page 4 and 5. Downside, we have Labour Act. Aviation workers issue 14-day ultimatum. And we have gridlock trapped Lagos Ibadan motorists passengers for 16 hours. Imagine going to work and being trapped in this gridlock for 16 good hours. So you actually be sacked, and then before you get back home to your wife or to your husband or to your family, and not, issues like these. I hope
Sad.
more will be done. And all
Yeah,
this comes as a result of impatient coming from motorists,
that's it.
bad roads
Bad
sometimes,
road, yeah.
and also, there are certain times that it's either people are not using the right road, because in Lagos Ibadan road, some of these things need to be put in
Just a lot
places.
of flimsy
Yeah.
traffic mistakes here and there that causes this kind
Yeah,
of
and
problem.
then you see lots of these trucks either, breaking down on the road and
Yes.
then causing all this issue.
True.
I hope we'll address some of these. And the last story I'll be reading, which is on the strike, students to barricade expressway capered in Gige and Adomu. This is both the Minister of Education and also the Minister of Employment. And so we could actually just keep our fingers crossed. Read that on page 15 of the Punch newspaper.
On Al Jazeera, Uganda pays $65 million first installment in Congo War reparation. Aviation Amendment Act 2022. That's for the big story. Workers threaten showdown slam. Federal government and issues 14-day ultimatum to reserve anti-labor clauses in aviation bill. You can see more of that story on page 8. Court adjourns federal government suit against ASU strike till Friday 2023. The EU charges politicians on issue. More of that on page 30. ADC chairman tax candidate in 2023, Victor. You can see more of that story on page 22. Taraba, Emir walks out APC leader from palace. That's quite a story. You can read more of that on page 2. NCRI releases 2 new rice variations. Is the director. You can read more of that on page 10. Climate change. 600 million Africans at risk of severe drought. More of that on page 10. Lassa fever claims 170 lives in 9 months. NCDC. You can read more of that on page 22. And that's all the news on the Al Jazeera.
All right, looking at this last story you just read on Al
Yes.
Jazeera newspaper, it actually captured my mind. Looking at the saying, Lassa fever claims 117 lives in 9 months. And you remember we also spoke about the monkeypox.
Yeah,
Nigeria is the
monkeypox,
highest
yes.
in Africa. And we're still having the COVID still with us. We're
Still.
yet to be, we're yet to get over it. So I just hope that the Ministry of Health, we want to know if this is what has happened, what are the measures in place to avoid such from happening. We keep saying it, that most of this awareness that's been done is mostly in the urban area. We don't go to the rural areas. And you
don't.
realize that they are the ones always at the receiving end of this thing, because they are not aware of what they need to do to prevent Lassa fever. I mean, this is something that we can prevent it as
I was
much as
just
possible.
about to say the real work is not being done. Because if you keep sensitizing those who really have these diseases, then you're not doing the real work. You need to go to those people that are at higher risks and talk to them, because for years Lassa fever, like, then it means something is not done properly. Because if it's true, then we shouldn't be there are some diseases that after a while we should be done with them and say, okay, we should be saying 10 years ago we had Lassa fever and we've been Lassa fever free for 10 years. It means something is not being done properly. You can't just keep staying at the urban areas and just talking to those who are not the ones being affected. You need to take it to where the people are affected, and if not, you're not doing your job. It might look like you're doing something, but you're not doing the right thing.
Of course, so I just hope that the Ministry of Health will be, join their hands together in collaboration with the various ministries in the state level, and even go down to the local government area, just like I have said, and teach them what is expected. I mean, covering your food properly, making sure you wash things to eat, and then you don't just, whenever you observe any, signs, because sometimes you do not know that even some medical personnel have actually died because you really cannot ascertain what is the problem as of that time. But I believe that if this sensitization is being done, especially in the rural areas, to the local government roots down to everybody, I believe that we'll be able to, this number will really go down
Let them know the
drastically.
type of rat, because it's not every type of rat.
You get
That's what
it?
I
So there
think.
should
Let
be a
them know that.
particular rat, and it has a
Yeah,
name, and this
it
is
has a
one of
name.
the
Let them
assignments
know.
that the Ministry of Health actually to say, because we just hear rats, and then at the end
Rat.
of the day,
Exactly.
decision will be done. Well, let's move further to the Daily Independent newspaper. Obi vows to stop the oil theft and use proceeds to end ASU strike. The writer following the story says the NLC, which is the Labour Congress TUC, to activate their structures nationwide for Labour Party. You can read up that inside the paper. No biometric verification, no exam jam, tell candidates. The big story, arrested terrorists, oil thieves must not escape justice. This is coming from the Senate, where the writer assures security agency will receive lion's share in the 2023 budget. Well, we hope we'll not make promises that we cannot keep at the end of the day.
Hope not.
Nigerian Airlines and others to acquire 1,010 airplanes at $176 billion in 18 years. Atiku's desperation for power may ruin Nigerians' unity. You can read up that on page 29. 9 rescued as building sinks in Lagos. Detail found on page 7. I hope something will be done to check the issue of collapse and sinking of building, not just in Lagos, but in other, every building in the 36 states, including the FCT. Troops rescue 6 kidnapped victims in Kaduna. Detail found on page 7 also. Amechi is a total failure, says Governor Wike. And still on another strike, court adjourns the federal government suit against ASU to September 16. We have another mini big story that said INEC ramps up preparation for the 2023 polls, invite the UN, the European Union, the African Union, and also others. So you can read up that inside the paper. Downside, we have Heritage Bank appoints active managing director and executive directors. You can read up that also on page 7. We have a picture story here where we can see President Muhammadu Buhari, Kayode Fayemi, the governor of Ekiti State, the newly elected president forum of the regionals of Africa during the latter's visit to the president at the State House on Monday, which was yesterday. Well, that's all on the Daily Independent.
Now we go to Business Day. The big story, corporates revalue insured assets on inflation, FX pressure. And you can see a chart there, and if you can read a chart, I guess it will further explain to you what the foreign exchange pressure is all about. Registered voters accuse ANEC of frustrating PVC collection. Federal government request to end petrol imports drags on. You can see that on page 2. Nigerians groan over worsening Lagos and Ibadan Express gridlock. They have every right to complain, but who are you complaining to? Is it to your fellow motorists? Is it to the pedestrian, or is it to the government? Alcohol drinks sales surged 33% despite price hike. Why NNPC didn't grow like OPEC peers, ex-top executive. And that's all the news on the Business Day today.
All right, let's round it up with the Voice of Liberty. Castina resident panic over 2-day hailstorm. You can read up that story on the Voice of Liberty. And we have from Kaduna, NDLEA arrests 761 drug suspect and 611,000 kilogram worth of drugs. Wow, this is quite a huge. I hope more will be done to interrogate and also prosecute those behind that. On 2023, Tinubu is not withdrawing from the presidential race. He's strong and healthy. This is coming from the APC PCC. Nigeria bleed as massive judgment debt crippled the nation's finances. Liability is now 17 trillion naira. The rising judgment debts award against Nigeria by local and international courts of appreciation for contract violation have continued to stall the nation's finances. Well, I hope we're doing something about our debt. Just like we said, we need to invest more and borrow less, because when we borrow, it's expected that we use that money to invest, so that we don't keep going back to borrow again. Because Nigerians have been asking questions. We've been borrowing and borrowing. What are we using the money for? If you've done certain infrastructure, it's supposed to be visible for Nigerians to see and benefit from it. We keep giving loans to Nigerians and said, oh, we keep saying we're going to give them bailouts or we're going to give them little fund. I mean, just last week, or was it last 2 weeks, a certain amount of money was being disbursed to Castina into their cattle ranching, and also to help some of the people, the vulnerable and the widows. But then I keep saying, when you keep giving me the fish and you do not teach me how to fish, for how long will you keep giving me this fish? Looking at the fact that we keep going down, we cannot meet our upper quarter of the oil. We're having food crisis, insecurity left, right, and center. We keep borrowing. In fact, our 2023 budget, we cannot meet up because the money. You see, a lot of things are coming up.
This money that you're lending, or whatever the term you use to this cattle, whatever, are you getting anything back? Because in the end, you're still dashing them money. So we can't be borrowing to pay things like salary and or for the renovation of Asu Villa or upkeeps of our senators. No, it needs to go into investment. It would be foolish of me to borrow 100,000, for example, just to buy clothes, except if me wearing those clothes is making me money. Then I'm able to pay back exactly with interest, except, so whatever we are borrowing for or we are lending money, we should be able to put it into investment for us to be able to get something out of it. If not, our debt will keep piling and it will swallow us very soon.
Of course, Rachel. Well, let me quickly round up the Voice of Liberty. And still on 2023, Peter Obi to unveil agenda and host party leadership retreat. From Tombolo, we have NNPC promoting criminality with 48 billion naira surveillance contract. This comes from the CISLAC boss. Wike to Amici, you're a failure in Rivers, says he can't ever enter presidential villa again. And we have a false video claim Tinubu scam said it has uncovered Peter's Obi plan to spread ethnic hatred among voters. We still have the countdown for the Kaduna train terror attack, and it's already 168 days in captivity. Well, that's all, and how far we can go on the show today. Thank you so much, Rachel, for doing this with me.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
And thank you so much to our viewers for also contributing and also for always watching us. Until we come your way again, do have a blessed day.